The night in Oslo wasn't just a celebration of securing a spot at the 2026 World Cup. It was the night the entire football world saw more clearly that Erling Haaland has never felt insecure about coming from a small footballing nation. On the contrary, he sees it as a responsibility and a source of pride, something worth giving everything for under that modest flag. While many players lament being born in the wrong place, Haaland chooses to shoulder Norway, pulling his homeland's national team back to the biggest stage in world football after nearly 3 decades of absence. It's a story that's not only beautiful but also deeply logical, and a hard-earned lesson for many other players. Just as Haaland once said, "If we qualify for the World Cup, it would be no different from a great footballing powerhouse winning the tournament." Last night, those words came true in Oslo during this past summer. In an interview with journalist Sean Gregory of Time magazine, Haaland was asked what seemed like a casual question: "Do you think the United States can win the World Cup?" Haaland didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked back, "Between the US and Norway, which team has a better chance of winning the World Cup?" Before the journalist could respond, he continued, "You don't need to answer. Norway will never win the World Cup. If we qualify for the World Cup, it would be like a major powerhouse winning the entire tournament. It would be the biggest celebration ever. Oslo would be an incredible sight. I don't want to be the guy who says the US will never win the World Cup and then they actually go on to win it. So I'll put their chances at 1%, and Norway's at 0.5%. At first glance, many people might misunderstand his words as pessimistic, even self-deprecating toward his own national team. But in context, they represent the height of clarity. Haaland isn't delusional, nor does he try to paint Norway as stronger than it is. He looks reality straight in the eye. A country of just over 5 million people, where football isn't even the #1 sport, and with only 3 rare World Cup appearances in its entire history. Their achievements are modest when compared to footballing powerhouses. Yet the important thing is this: even while acknowledging that their chances of winning the World Cup are practically zero, Haaland never once shows any sense of inferiority or embarrassment about his small homeland. He doesn't speak in the tone of, "If only I had been born in Brazil, France, or Argentina." He doesn't avoid the truth, but he also doesn't use that truth as an excuse to complain. His statement that Norway will never win the World Cup isn't the remark of someone giving up. It's the remark of someone who knows exactly what he is fighting for. For Haaland, the goal isn't to lift the trophy just to match others. His goal is to bring the people of Norway into the atmosphere of world football. To give his country the biggest football celebration it has ever had, just as he envisioned. And just as he has now turned into reality. To understand why Haaland cherishes this World Cup ticket so deeply, we had to go back to the scar left in 2021. 4 years ago, during the 2022 World Cup qualifiers, Norway had been very close to earning a place in Qatar, but at the most crucial moment, Haaland got injured. He sat at home, helpless, watching his teammates draw with Latvia and then lose 0-2 to the Netherlands in the decisive match for their World Cup hopes. That night, disappointment spread across Norway, but no one felt it more painfully than Haaland. From being the man expected to carry the national team, he suddenly became someone who could only sit in front of the TV, gritting his teeth as the World Cup dream shattered. For another player, that moment could have sent them spiraling into negativity, blaming fate, blaming their country's football system, blaming the simple fact of being born in a nation that wasn't strong enough. But not Haaland. He never said anything like, "There was nothing more I could do because my national team is too weak." On the contrary, the helplessness of that year became a thorn embedded deep inside him, a reminder every single day that if he wanted to see Norway's flag at the World Cup, he couldn't afford to get injured, couldn't afford to play average, and couldn't allow himself to be satisfied with club-level glory. The 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign was like Haaland's way of settling an old debt, and he paid it back in the most ruthless manner possible. In a group that included Euro 2020 champions Italy and several tricky opponents, Norway completely transformed. They won relentlessly, scored with machine-like consistency. And at the center of everything, of course, was Haaland. The numbers don't lie. Haaland contributed the majority of the team's goals. In many matches, he decided the result on his own, a hat-trick against Israel, braces, pokers, and then a demolition of Moldova with 5 goals in a single match. Few players can do that at the national team level. More importantly, he delivered exactly when Norway needed him most. Against formidable opponents like Italy, a team that has never been an easy prey for anyone, he still showed up. And when Norway finally secured qualification, Haaland shared his feelings in the simplest way. It was something he had waited for many years. It was the pressure he had carried on his shoulders ever since the failure of 2021. It was the gift he had longed to give the people of Norway, who had waited far too long. In his words, there wasn't even the slightest hint of inferiority about coming from a small footballing nation. There was only pride, mixed with the relief of a man who has finally fulfilled the toughest promise of his life. Haaland's story becomes even more remarkable when we remember that he actually had another option. Born in Leeds, he was fully eligible to play for the England national team, a place with far greater chances of winning trophies, earning titles, and attracting massive media spotlight. But he chose Norway, the homeland where his father once played, where he spent his childhood running through quiet streets, and where the red-blue-white flag is tied to every family memory he has. Many players, after becoming stars at big clubs, start comparing, if I had been born in this or that country, I might have won one or two more titles. Haaland is the opposite. He has never said anything resembling regret about coming from a small footballing nation. He openly acknowledges that Norway has little chance of winning the World Cup, but he sees that very fact as what makes qualifying for it so rare and so profoundly meaningful. In Haaland, people see a strange but beautiful blend of humility and boldness. He is humble when assessing his team's chances, yet utterly fearless when standing in front of any goal. Every time he steps onto the pitch, he plays with the mindset that he is there to change the history of his small country. He doesn't lower his head because Norway is small, he raises it because he has the opportunity to do something big for a small nation. That is the difference between inferiority and clarity. The insecure look at their circumstances and give up. The clear-minded look at their circumstances and know they must work twice as hard. As one of the world's top superstars, Haaland has every reason to seek the spotlight. He could turn the national team into his personal stage, turning every issue into a story about himself. But the admirable thing is that he doesn't. In Norway's colors, Haaland is still the focal point, but the focal point of a team. Not of a private universe in which everyone else revolves around him. When the team struggles, he doesn't scold his teammates on the pitch or throw his arms around in frustration. Instead, he chooses to communicate, reminding them to cross earlier, to be bolder in sending the ball into the box, to take risks in the final plays. When the team wins big, he doesn't take all the credit for himself. He pulls the whole squad into a celebration circle, sharing the spotlight with those who rarely get attention. When you are both humble and fully aware of your own value, there is no need for insecurity, and Haaland is exactly that kind of person. He knows who he is, whether at Manchester City or with Norway, but he never lets his personal ego overshadow the badge on his chest. The story of Haaland and Norway isn't just a modern-day football fairy tale. It's a living textbook for many other players, especially those from smaller footballing nations in Asia or Africa. The first lesson: don't blame your origins. You may come from a footballing system that is underdeveloped, with an unprofessional domestic league and limited facilities. That's reality, but it's not a life sentence. Haaland also grew up in a small town, raised in a football culture that hardly registered on the world map. He couldn't change where he was born, but he could change how he trained, how he played, and how he climbed step by step to Europe's highest stage, eventually raising the stature of his own homeland. The second lesson: once you choose your flag, give everything for it. Haaland had every right to choose a stronger, more prestigious national team, but he chose Norway. And once he chose, he never measured gains or losses, never treated the national team as secondary to his club. Many players from smaller football nations complain the moment they join the national squad. There's no system here that suits my style. Or, I can't shine in this environment. Haaland is the opposite. He adapts himself to Norway, not demand that Norway adapt to him. The third lesson: be humble, but don't shrink. Admitting your team is weak or your odds are small doesn't mean entering the field with a defeated mindset. Haaland knows Norway has just a 0.5% chance of winning the World Cup. Yet every match he plays as if it were a final, as if every goal could rewrite history. Many players say, "We're still far behind," and use that as justification for accepting defeat. Haaland says the same thing, but uses it as motivation to work twice as hard. In the end, not everyone will reach the summit, but everyone can leave a mark. Maybe Norway will never touch the World Cup trophy. Maybe Holland will never get to shout, "We are the champions," on a World Cup final night. But simply bringing Norway back to the World Cup after nearly 30 years is enough. Just the sight of that night's lights in Oslo, that alone has carved his name into the history of Norwegian football in his own unique way. Not everyone gets their name engraved on a trophy, but anyone can be engraved in the hearts of fans.